Welcome to the Journey Mindfulness Podcast. I'm your host, James O'Neill, and we have a really amazing guest today, Reuben Langdon, coming all the way from Japan.
Yes. Hello. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, you have had a very interesting career coming from Hollywood, and then I really love how your friend Georgia Jean puts it, coming out of the cosmic closet.
Totally. Yes. I came out of the closet while still working on the movie Avatar. So it was an interesting time.
Okay. Yeah. What happened? What was the event?
Oh, hold on a second. Okay. All right.
Well,
Sorry about that.
no worries, man. It's all good. Um, it was really impressive to me when we talked to Daniel Scranton last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever that was. How the sound with his channeling and the vibrations and everything, how that resonates through.
Mm.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. I think he had his settings pretty dialed in as well. Cause I noticed when I asked him, I was like, hey, these types of things are definitely an issue. And then he's like, oh, no, we're good. I've dialed it in. I fixed it.
Yeah.
He's a pro. He's been doing it.
Yeah, you guys are both pros, but I would imagine though with all the if I recall correctly, there was an your episode with Daryl Anka. He was
Oh,
channeling
yeah, yeah.
Bashar, and there was, like, I don't something happened with the mic, it either popped or, like,
The
flipped off or something?
Literally the pack, the battery pack that, for the receiver for his microphone literally popped off his belt,
Yeah,
which those things are pretty, like, and he wasn't moving. Like, he wasn't, like, doing any heavy things to create any kind of, movement so that thing could come off.
yeah.
So even if it was on there kind of in a flimsy way, I don't everybody in the room were just like, "Whoa, something supernatural just happened here." It's
I mean, I would imagine those things tend to happen just with the different energies that seem to come through.
Yeah, 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 I've had a few anomalies when it comes to tech. Um, Not so much in the channeling world. I was down in Guatemala, filming the Grand Elder of the Maya, Alejandro Perez, Wandering Wolf, and he was sick in bed, and I had 2 cameras. We went in to do a little filming. 2 cameras, separately had same issues at the certain spot when they were in their rooms, so that was kind of an interesting anomaly that I came across. So those happen. They're not all the time, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting when they do. You take notice. You're like, "Okay, that's weird."
Well, I mean, it's all cool. What, so I was asking you before, what kinda was the event that opened you up? You know, sometimes
Oh.
in, the spiritual community, they talk about awakening, but you had this career in Hollywood, doing your thing, and then, you know, jokingly calling it coming out of the cosmic closet, but what was the event that really got your attention in the first place?
Well, at a young age, my mom was, part of the Ramtha cult. Um, and I say that, I don't mean to offend anybody who's part of that, but if you're part of it, it's kinda culty. So, it's a mild cult. There's definitely a lot of different cult, religious groups and things out there, and I think religion as a whole is a cult. But, um the Ramtha cult is, if you're familiar, it's Jay-Z Knight who channels a being called Ramtha. She was very popular in the 80s, early 90s. And then something went sour around that time, around the late 90s, mid to late 90s, where a lot of fear mongering had gotten into the channelings and
Mhm.
into the messaging of Jay-Z. A lot of people are probably familiar with the film What the Bleep.
Yeah.
So What the Bleep was actually uh, produced and created by Ramtha followers,
Oh,
a- and uh,
I
and
did
a lot
not
of
know
people
that.
don't know that Doctor Doctor Joe Dispenza also was originally part of the Ramtha. group as well, and a lot of, you know, people who are making headways in with quantum physics and all these things, a lot of their original ideas and influences came from Ramtha. So Ramtha had some really good information, especially back in the day, that was opening a lot of people up. But as things do, things tend to get hijacked and energies come in, and who knows all how that happened, whether it was CIA, voice of God, or Jay-Z not having a clear energy or channel or whatever. But anyways, it kind of went south and went
Okay.
in a very culty way. But anyways, I was exposed to that at a young age. So my mom was always talking about aliens are real. You can use your mind to create anything you want, and I sort of had this um, it, positive influence when it came to belief systems. And even though I didn't really buy into it, it wasn't my thing. I told my mom I didn't want any part of it. I, I think just having that in the background helped keep an open mind for me. So fast forward, I moved to Japan at a young age of 19. I get into martial arts and the movie industry, and I'm working with Jackie Chan and other prominent figures in Asia. And then I moved back to the States, and I'm working in the Hollywood industry. And my goal really is just to focus on stunts and film. And that's my passion up until uh, when I'm on set in 2007 on Avatar. I was the main stunt double for Jake Sully. Um, then where YouTube is coming out, the Disclosure Project, I see for the first time, Dr. Greer's 2001 Disclosure Project event, and I'm like, "Oh my god, my mom was right, aliens are real," my mind is getting, exposed. The Zeitgeist movies were made available on YouTube for free. 9/11 is an inside job, all of this stuff was sort of getting
Yeah.
revealed to me, and I think I was just primed with my belief structures where I was with everything. And then I had this crazy UFO experience. Well, actually very mild. It wasn't that crazy. But for me at the time, it's very crazy. Now people have those every day.
Yeah.
But I saw these lights, middle of the day, lights in the sky, couldn't explain. And I couldn't let it go. It captured that experience, captured my curiosity so strong and so deep that I looked up Dr. Stephen Greer and joined one of his 2010 gathering in Rio Rico, Arizona for it was a weekend C5 event. There were
Mhm.
other speakers there, Richard Hoagland, and others, and then realized the connection, the um, mind heart connection to the C5 protocols, learning about that,
Yeah.
making having more experiences connecting, seeing these beings, or seeing these craft, I should say. So once that was sort of the nail in the coffin, I was like, I can't go back. Once you understand that there's more out there than
Yeah.
what we've been told on a collective sort of cultural societal level, and then you start digging and going through the files and understanding that there's been a conspiracy to withhold this information from the general public. It just felt to me like this was my worldview was so expanded and opened and shifted just from knowing that we weren't alone,
Yeah.
that I was like, what would happen to the whole world if the whole world knew we weren't alone? How would that affect the psyche, the consciousness, the societal affairs, day-to-day life? Just knowing that, whether it's, shows up in your face or not, but just having that knowledge and knowing that in your heart of hearts, how would that affect society? So it became kind of a mission of mine to spread the news and go as far and wide as I could to tell people about. So not only did I come out of the closet, I wanted to get other people out of the closet as much as possible.
Well well, to your credit, you've definitely been living that. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I interviewed, Tony Ghazi,
Oh, okay.
a few
Yeah,
months ago, and we were just sharing. I think it was well, I'll maybe back up maybe a little bit before that, but
mm,
I'm a therapist, which so when you have one foot in the clinical world, this stuff is so far removed from everything. Like
sure.
it's like okay, wow, like you, but then you can't unlearn this stuff really, right? Like
Yep,
once you I teach mindfulness, so like you talk about being open and curious, and those are two of the your main drivers as well, right? It's like okay,
absolutely.
I can't go back. But I in one of my, therapy sessions, one of my clients had gone to a psychic medium and started talking about me in their session, and this person had no idea who I was or anything like that. So I got curious, and eventually I talked to this medium, and he starts sharing all of this information about me, and then he goes, "Yeah, you have this connection with Arcturians," and I'm like, "What is an Arcturian? What are you talking?" So so anyway, at some point, COVID had started, and I had the Gaia network, and I was watching your television show, Interview with Ed, and, oh, I wrote her name down, Anayana.
I know, yeah, yep.
Anayana, um, who's a younger woman who was channeling the 11th dimensional Arcturians, and I put on the show, and I'm, you know, like, "What's gonna happen here? I have no idea." And then she starts channeling, and as she's channeling, I'm looking at her like, this is not her. This is something else coming through. And I can't even remember what exactly came through, but we were talking about consciousness. There clearly she was tapping into something higher than her. Although I don't know if I really want to say that word.
Well,
How
yeah, yeah, a different aspect or yeah,
so I was just fascinated by it, and then that sort of opened me up to, okay, there is this other stuff going out there, and then I got into, like, the Law of One and kinda some of the things related to that, started to meet people, but Tony and I kinda talked about, like kinda had the same epiphany going back to your kind of mission with bringing people out of the cosmic closet, like, he watched your show and opened his mind, and it was the same for me. I was like, "Okay, there is a lot I don't know that's going on right now." So you're holding true to your mission, man.
well, thank you. It's, it's I've been so captivated by the information, and I've, as much as possible, tried to, walk the talk, and integrate a lot of the teachings, in my day-to-day life, and I've had profound, um, growth, and I say just overall a positive experience from integrating these teachings into my
Mhm,
day-to-day life. So I feel like, you know, it, it's one thing to sort of preach to the choir, but if you actually have the experience and then can um verbalize it or put it into an easier to understand way for people to take in, why not, so it's kind of just been really documenting my journey is been the, even though it's not like, you know, like a documentary, like, okay, Ruben did this and that. But I'm basically, that's what I'm doing. I'm just documenting my journey, through this wacky world of discovering that we're not alone in the universe.
yeah, no, I mean, you brought up a number of really good points there. I think sometimes when I get excited talking about things to people around me, they get very overwhelmed. Like there's a lot of information. And so, like you said, it's really hard. Well, not hard, but you know, how do you articulate it in a way that makes sense? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter necessarily how much you know about it
Right.
in some sense. Like it's how are you living or how do you integrate it in your daily life?
Exactly. Exactly. And we all come from different backgrounds, different, religious backgrounds, cultural, societal backgrounds. So the reference points we all have are going to be unique to each of us individually. So I think having as many reference points to this type of information as possible to give people some sort of starting point or place to a comfort zone. So this information doesn't sound like, the teacher, Charlie Brown teacher, wah, 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 it's because it
Yeah.
can, it's overwhelming at times. So that was part of my goal with the series was to, interview as many different people as I can with different backgrounds and say, hey, look, they're all saying the same thing. It's, they're using different vocabularies, but essentially the core teachings, the core understandings of what is the universe, how does it work. Um, there, all of these different channelers, different, and the beings that they channel from different so-called parts of the galaxy, uh, or universe, they're all saying the same thing. So that's another part of my, my own exploration, realizing that, okay, this it's all the same. It's just giving it different flavors, and that's why I say in my show I offer a buffet of different tidbits of information. So whatever whoever resonates with this or that, and they can sort of pick and choose what they want, and they'll all end up going the same down the same path, though. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, the same destination, different path, same destination.
yeah, no, it's really interesting. I was telling you about some synchronicities. So I had, in addition to meditation, I got into hypnosis, and in starting this podcast, was just kind of meditating one day and thinking like, who would I enjoy interviewing? And so I reached out to Jacqueline Smith
Oh, great. Yeah, yeah.
and was able to connect with her and had a few sessions with her, and was able to have a really good time talking with her. And then in the midst of that, I interviewed someone else named Kate Chassé, who
Mhm.
is a really awesome. She was a really great guest, but she was an experiencer and she's had all kinds of experiences. And just in conversation with her at the very end of it, I said, you probably had some other experiences. Like what's one that might be going on now? And she said, well, there's this mantis being that's been poking its head around in my basement, and it's just trying to be friendly and say hi and let me know that it's there. And I'm like, this is the most this is the most hilarious thing I've ever heard. Like this mantis being is just kind of saying hi. But then I'm like, it's really funny, like this connection with mantis beings and then Tony and this kind of stuff. So anyway, she says, well, have you ever heard of this? Do you know who Stuart Davis is? And I'm like,
Oh,
I've
yeah,
never, I've,
sort yeah,
I've never heard of Stuart Davis.
yeah.
She's like, "Well, you might wanna check check them out if you are interested in mantis beings." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Well, have you ever heard of Reuben Langdon?" And she goes, "No, I've never heard of Reuben Langdon." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, anyway, I'm curious enough, I go and look up Aliens and Artists, his podcast, and lo and behold, Jacqueline Smith is in the first episode, which is super interesting, and then you were in the episode with him a few episodes later,
Yeah, yep,
and I'm
yep,
like, "You know what? This Here we go with the mantis."
the mantis folks have a way of finding each other, I've noticed on the interwebs and whatnot. It's, definitely an interesting crowd, which I'm
Well,
part of.
so it's interesting though, because I would not necessarily consider myself in that crowd, but just these things popping up, and maybe I am, and I just don't fully comprehend it yet. But
I think that means you're part of the mantis crowd, yeah. If you're having mantis conversations and the synchronicities are popping up like that, I would, definitely pay attention.
okay, well, we'll see.
Welcome to the club.
We have. Well, so you've been interviewing so many fascinating people in this very interesting time. How has your process evolved over time, just in how you approach this information and the phenomenon and all this stuff?
Well, I started, with this interest in ufology, sort of having that UFO experience and that being at the time in 2007 the lowest hanging fruit of what did I experience and seeing, you know, craft or weird objects floating in the sky for a certain amount of time and then disappearing. So that was my and then also growing up as a kid, being a fan of Star Trek and sci-fi and then the influences of my mom and the Ramtha and the school and their teachings. reading Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, and then in book 3, him going into this idea that we're not alone and that our Earth has been visited. So having that as a reference point and going, my curiosity was really about sort of that, and then going that direction led me into my show. Well, first it led me into producing the Citizen hearing in 2003, the Citizen hearing on UFO disclosure, bringing together whistleblowers and researchers in front of 6 former members of Congress and having this 5-day mock congressional hearing, which I thought would force disclosure. Right, the naive me, not understanding all the intricate aspects of government and how what a wall that was set up there, and it's now collapsing, which is awesome. But that UFO subject was the driving force. I thought that was the key that I had to unlock. And going down that hole, I got to know Wendy and the Palladians and others on my show, Nora and Daryl and many prominent channelers. And just following that thread, thinking again in my mind, okay, Palladians equals ETs and craft. And then it was actually in that first interview with Wendy that she said, the what are you going to, she asked, what are you going to call this? I didn't even have a name for the show. I was still it was a concept in 2014 that I was just putting together.
Was
And
she was the first was she the
she was my
first
first
episode?
interview. Yeah.
Mm.
So, I said, I don't know, I'm thinking like interview with an ET or something like that. And she said, well, I'm actually getting the P's are coming in right now. They're telling me that you might want to use the term extra dimensional instead of and that's where ED, interview with Ed comes from, is literally her channeling through the Palladians and letting me know that this concept of what an ET is going to shift as we move forward. And at the time, I didn't have a reference for that, but years doing the show, a decade of interviewing different channelers and different beings and different understandings of what all that is, I've really shifted my perspective on what is the phenomenon. And I think that term phenomenon is a better term to use because it shows up in all forms and fashions, and it's not limited to a tin can metal object floating in the sky. That's an aspect of it, depending on the race and depending on the beings or the consciousness that's coming through. But it's far too grand of an experience to limit to this sort of sci-fi idea that we've held for so long through our science fiction movies and stuff like that. So really, I think the biggest takeaway over the years of doing this is the detachment of the story, and to understand and know that we're writing the story as we go. And depending on who's observing, it's like the collapsing of the particle, with the double slit experiment. Yeah, depending on how you look at it, it's going to collapse into a wave or what do they call it? A grid line in the pack, or it can be a particle, or it can be a wave, or it can be a solid, depending on how you look at it. So I think that's the collective humanity, as our lens shifts over to that reality. And then you have to factor in all the different, the billions of people on the planet and the belief systems that we all have.
Mhm.
Uh, it, it's going to be a very nuanced, different experience for us all. Uh, until we get to that point where first contact happens, and they're maybe on the news, maybe a Palladian ship lands and the person gets out of the car, or not car, but the craft, and White House lawn, and presidents shaking hands and that kind of thing. But I think even that is an old, 60s type of perspective based on movies and ideas and concepts. And I think it doesn't have form. I think the form is up to the belief system of the person. People have interactions with angels and Jesus, Mother Mary, the different aspects of the Quran might show up in different here in Japan, there's lots of the yokai is a big sort of thing in old Japan and different beings and how they show up. So I think it's going to differ and be and people will access it in their own unique ways and and will eventually there'll be a consensus onto what the phenomenon is. But until then, I think limiting it to tin cans in the sky is a disservice.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think kind of you're talking about the double slit, like we're
Mhm.
a term that you often hear in different channels is we're all co-creating our reality.
Yep.
And so it's constantly shifting. And so, there's all these shows about predictions of, what's 2025 going to look like and when are the aliens going to land and what's the exact date and all these kinds of things. It's like it's constantly in flux, right? Like who knows? Like there's generally a timeline of sorts, but then again, we're only just in the present moment, the eternal present moment as well.
Yeah, and that's the teachings, right? That's what they say is time is an illusion, no expectations, I don't have expectations. So following the teachings have led me to a new conclusion of what the phenomenon is, where we're at with it, and then how to detach from the any uh, potential outcomes and just allow it to form and be. And it's just a much more rich experience. For me, it has been, and has allowed me to reach out to many people, on different spectrums. That's why my show, I especially in season 3, I started going into more interviewing, and talking to people about like light language, shamanism, indigenous teachings. I think it's all interconnected, and and I think we're finding that out. But I think so many people just they like their compartmentalized cookie cutter concept of what this or that is, and that's their comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it can be limiting.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Catholic, and it's there's that tradition and those teachings, and then I, at a young age in college, traveled to Thailand and started learning about Buddhism and all these other religions and different paths, and it really opened me up. And to your point though about our beliefs, like there's all these different paths and they're all unique and have their own way, but it's getting to the destination. And a lot of these indigenous things, they were kind of ahead of the curve, it seems like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, that was my dabble in indigenous cultures and hanging around a lot of the shamans and medicine men of those different tribes. When you hear again what it's just like channeling, when you hear what they're saying and the teachings, it's all the same stuff. It's just, different flavors.
mm, interesting. Just- and if I remember correctly, during Avatar, you had experience with that, right? You did some training, like was it language training and other stuff?
Yeah, on set, Cameron was a stickler for details, so he brought in a linguist uh, who knew a lot of different languages and was able to, based on and the Navi language was based on a lot of indigenous languages. So finding different tones and sounds and throughout and he would invent stuff on set there. He would say, okay, well, we need a word for this, and Cameron would
Oh,
sort of give him some homework and he's like, okay, you know and he kind of created a basic vocabulary with basic meanings and then would sort of create words and sounds out of that, which was quite beautiful experience. But again, it was based on a lot of indigenous teachings, and I didn't know anything about indigenous cultures. I didn't really, that wasn't part of my zeitgeist or study or interest until I was working on Avatar and as homework. Cameron, again, being that stickler for detail, gave us lots of homework where we had to um, perform and act and be as indigenous as possible. So
Yeah.
so trying to get into the skin of an indigenous native, on another planet, kind of thinking how that would work and how he would give us a knife and say, okay, here's the design of the knife. It's designed this way for these specific tasks. Now, Ruben, come up with some kind of creative, unique movement that you would use this knife to do these tasks. Um, that would be practical, but also interesting for, just in the background. If someone's watching and they see you're just a background guy cutting a fish open with this knife, it's still unique and different, so it has its own flavor on this other world. So those are like the type of details we'd get a little homework on, and then I'd go
Interesting.
and practice and literally have dead fish, really real dead fish on set, that I would be cutting up and, mangling and go home with smelly
Oh my
that
god.
day because I'm cutting fish all day on set.
That's
So those
interesting.
little yeah, those little things were helping me, embody. I got to be part of, a Maori, haka ceremony, because
Okay.
Cameron went, a large portion of the live action aspects of the film were shot in New Zealand, so he
Oh,
was
I didn't know that.
exposed to the Maori culture, and he learned about the haka and said, "I want that in Avatar." So he flew a group to LA, and it was a small group, and they said, "Well, we typically have more people in this." And they're like, "Okay, Ruben, get in there, learn this haka thing." So I'm like, doing the whole tongue thing and all that stuff.
Yeah. No,
So
I was a rugby player, man. That's intense.
yeah, yeah. So I got to learn about uh, indigenous cultures from just, my experience on Avatar. It was a nice homework assignment. And again, I think that was part of this awakening for me, which led to that experience, was just all of the culmination of all of these different, the indigenous, watching YouTube videos of Stephen Greer and Disclosure Project. Like, like I said, it just all came in and was like, okay, boom, you're being guided here to with your new set of instructions on life, which did turn my life around. I quickly switched over from wanting to be an action star on film and television, and moved into, I want to wake up humanity with the secrets of the universe.
Man, I mean, that's, quite a shift, although I don't to me, it's very interesting that it was Avatar that kinda like, you were in that, right? Like, so it's that movie, I feel like is like a foreshadowing of all these other things that are happening now.
Yeah. 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 I remember after Avatar wrapped, I'd been hanging out. Uh, this was like at a 2010 CES, Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. Was hanging out with Cameron, with just a few of us that worked on the show, in his hotel room and sipping on wine, talking. And I told Cameron, I said, you're the film Avatar was like shifted the consciousness of the planet. You have no idea. And he's like, no, no, no. If Avatar had come out 10 years earlier, it would have tanked. He said the consciousness of the planet was ready to receive Avatar. And and I was like,
He
oh,
said that?
mm, yeah, he said that.
Wow.
And at the time, I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, I never looked at it that way," but I think it's both. I think one influences the other, but absolutely, I think, same with my show. My show, the timing of it, I actually released my show in 2015, and barely had it was on Vimeo and barely had anybody watch it. I think it was pre-COVID. Gaia picked it up, and it was just the timing of COVID, people being at home wanting, to consume some content, and what's this thing? And so I think it really is a timing, where the consciousness, receives it. the citizen hearing I produced in 2010, or 2013, laughed at by mainstream media. My all my friends and colleagues were like, "What are you doing? You're wasting your time. This is just a pipe dream. Aliens aren't real." Even though I, produced this big event, a multi-million dollar budget, and which never made any money, and I actually lost the investors' money, and I had to and hung on for a long time there. And now finally I made it for free on YouTube. And even then, at once I made it for free, still people weren't it barely got any views. But
Mm,
now it's finally people are watching it, and with all the disclosures happening in Congress and all that stuff, yeah, I think Jake Barber is his name. He
yeah.
he gave it a shout out on his interview with, Jesse, Michaels, I think.
Oh, American Alchemy?
Yeah, American Alchemy. So it's nice to get, shout outs and sort of point people in that direction. So finally, over 10 years later, it's getting some headway, but it is a timing thing. I think, Cameron was absolutely right with his, assessment of the consciousness has to be ready to receive these things. You can't force it. You can't force disclosure. You can create the breadcrumbs for people to follow, but you can't. There's no people aren't going to accept it if there wasn't if the consciousness isn't ready. I think what's happening right now in politics and with the whole the corruption being uncovered through the Doge and all of that stuff, that's the same idea. This stuff has been going on for decades since the big, and nobody cared, it seemed, or nobody paid attention. I don't know, but now we're at a point where people are like, "Hey, there's a lot of corruption going on. We really need to take care of this." I'm like, it's actually been going on good,
Oh my god.
guys.
Reuben, my dad is 82 now, and I was telling him about JFK and all this stuff, and he's like, "What?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." Like, how did this go under the like, in the
Well, and we would sound the alarm. We would, tell people. I told people about JFK, when I found out back in, 2010-ish, I think. The UFO stuff was connected to that. So, and just everybody, same thing. You just know you're a conspiracy theorist, you're crazy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So again, people have to be ready to receive the information. And now we're at a place where people's minds and hearts are being opened up enough to say, yeah, that's actually that happened.
Well, so you brought up the Maori a little bit ago.
Hmm.
You said you enjoy talking about higher consciousness. Is the Maori connected with Lemuria?
I would think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think a lot of the Polynesian cultures, the Hawaiians, I know, I'm not sure about Maoris, but the Hawaiians, their term for the continent or their or origin is Mu. They literally that's part of their language, and I'm probably decimating the pronunciation, but Mu, the island of Mu, which we have ancient old maps even showing that this island in the Pacific, this continent existed,
Mhm.
and you check in with a lot of the different Polynesian cultures, and they talk about a great flood and a deluge that came and washed away the lands. So it's a similar story that we hear in other cultures in other parts of the world, but the Polynesian cultures definitely have that aspect, and even the name Mu, which is associated with the Lemurians.
Mm. And then you so I'm trying to get back to, like, higher levels of consciousness. You brought up
Hmm.
Jake Barber, and,
Hmm.
the most maybe recent, whistleblower, I guess you call him.
Yeah,
But he's, I think, one of the first people that's kinda you talked about a shout out, but talked about the spiritual component. I mean, I know
yeah,
Dr. Greer talks about that too, but, he's sort of the first. So I think we're slowly getting there.
totally. Yeah, it's
Um,
nice to see.
yeah. Um, how do you see or what how has your view of disclosure changed now? Like, what does disclosure even mean to you now at this point with where things are?
Well, I used to, when I produced a citizen hearing, I was again naive at the time, just coming onto the information, being a film guy. I had this preconceived idea that film and television being this powerful medium, that if we just sort of put it into a palatable story for people to take in, that's all that's needed to shift the world into understanding we're not alone. Um, and doing it in this form and fashion of having a mock congressional hearing or having Congress made it more believable. And there was tons of shows out at the time. Ancient Aliens has done a great service to humanity for waking people up to a lot of these so-called conspiracies or different events and crashes and crash retrievals and all this stuff. So been the masses have been educated little by little through different breadcrumbs being dropped through our media.
Mhm.
And for me, I just thought, well, disclosure is this, a mass, like the president or some, Congress, like we're getting right now, coming out and saying, we're not alone and that kind of thing. Well, that's
Yeah.
happened. Congress for the past few years, uh, especially with the David Grush hearings, almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
Um, has has you know, and news media, Matt Gaetz, others have gone on television, Congress members saying we're not alone. Literally out, just blatantly, we're not alone. There's something else out there. And yet here we are, uh, in a world where a lot of people still don't believe we're not alone. A lot of people think that this whole idea of aliens is a pipe dream, and ETs or beings or entities visiting us from other worlds is just all science fiction.
Yeah.
So disclosure, this idea of disclosure in the past was the way it was supposed to happen was, presidents getting on TV and we're all going to have, there's even a book that Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel wrote called The Day After Disclosure,
Mm.
which they sort of laid out this potential timeline of how the president comes on TV and says we're not alone and all this stuff, and everybody's like, "Oh my god!" And the stock market crashes and all this stuff. Well, it hasn't happened. It happened, but it hasn't.
Right.
Disclosures happened. We're in it. We're still getting more and more disclosures, like the Jake Barber and others of these programs and documents, and anybody with a curious mind can just pop open the internet and do some FOIA requests and get everything you need to know that the phenomenon is real, and we're not alone. So it's there, it's dangling right in everybody's faces, but uh, but it's not what I think was projected in, like when I was producing the citizen hearing, like the masses catching on as this big thing. We're so divided now, and what is science? With science, it's sort of been hijacked. We're getting all these Fauci disclosures, where in the COVID debacle, where so-called science was saying this, but we were finding out now that it was all lies and manipulated, and there was no true science, and these were just paid shills to get certain outcomes for to move a narrative along. So our whole idea and concept of trust the science is falling apart, and I think there's a bigger agenda at play here for that, for us all to come to our own conclusions and not to rely on this guy or the president coming in and saying, we're at a point now, if the president did come out say ETs are real, I think probably half of the world would, just say it's a psyop, he's lying, there's no truth. And
It's so
same with all
hard to
these
discern.
whistleblowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I we're at this. we're in a different time now where disclosure is what is disclosure? Like, it doesn't even you asked me that question, and it doesn't have the gravitas or the label or the even the understanding of what does that mean? It's been put into the, the washing machine and the dryer and
Like,
tumbled and
just, like,
and
diluted.
diluted and it's so, um so I think we're in disclosure. I think this is it. I think this is
Yeah,
happening right now, at a pace that's quite fast for and maybe too fast for a lot of people. So it's overwhelming, but it's also just right. I think it's happening in a beautiful, organic way, and I think these whistleblowers, even though the UFO Twitter is it's a mess, and this person's accusing that person of this and that and another, but I think it's all serving its purpose, uh, and it's you have the different agendas uh, and narratives on disclosure that are happening depending on the person, and even in my own right, my sort of corner of the UFO Twitter, talking about the consciousness aspects and really trying to guide people and going in that direction. But I think it's all valid. I don't think there's a one size fits all shoe for what is disclosure. And
yeah.
I'm glad it's happening and it has such large spectrum of nuanced narratives. I think that's disclosure. Is that where
Yeah.
there's it's gonna happen how it happens for each of us individually.
Well, I think Spielberg is coming out with a new movie, and he just
Mm.
renamed it Disclosure.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I saw some things on that. So, and again, that's gonna be a beautiful avatar with disclosure. I think all of it is valid, and when we can recognize that and get away from the nitpicking and bickering and name calling and shilling this person or that person,
Yeah.
um, and just realize that this is part of the process. This is all really awesome. That there is so much to choose from. There's a buffet, a disclosure buffet of
Yeah.
narratives if you want to choose which one you align with and go with it. It again, I think all paths lead to the same destination.
Well, you know, you were talking about some people are just not ready for it. A lot of them are my family members.
Sure, I have some too.
And, but what I try to tell them, and maybe you can touch on this too, is just to go into we were talking about integration earlier, but your heart and how you're living and how, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about you is how you put this into practice. It's not just, it's how you live your life, like doing breath work or being intentional about how you, flush your water or something like that, like just a very intentional way of living that's very admirable. Um, but going into the heart and internally, like, paying attention to the energy that you are exuding into the world in your way of being.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the different agendas and or narratives that are out there. Um, I I love the buffet and I love all the different storylines, but I what these teachings have taught me is we're living in the choose your own adventures. Those books. Remember the where you can get turned to page
Yep.
35 and
Yeah. Yeah.
go if you want A pick A, B, or C, and then if you go to pick B, you're gonna switch over to the other this page, and then you get a different ending or outcome. And I think that's how reality actually works. To not invalidate anybody's journey, but we get to choose. And if that's truly how the universe works, so far that's from my observation experience, that's how it seems to be working. Is we do get to choose our adventure here, and if that's the case, why not choose the let's say I don't want to give a hierarchy over anything, but highest, when I say the highest or most positive uh, uh, through line, the most positive storyline, which is void of you know, uh, evil aliens becoming demons and but taking over your body and bad AI nanoparticles getting into your blood and um, governments using technologies to manipulate and turn you into a zombie. All of those
S
storylines are
s
valid, and there's
soul
plenty of
snatching.
yeah, and there's plenty of yeah, soul snatching, or we're born into a prison planet. These are all great storylines that make for great science fiction, and I'm not invalidating them by any means. I think I what I like to do, if you follow my old Fridays, I look at the news, is look at all the different news narratives, and then I like to, for example, let's take the prison planet. That someone brought that up to me, like, "Hey, Ruben, have you come across this?" I'm like, "Yeah." And you, I don't know, James, if you've heard of the prison planet
Yeah, yeah.
concept.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
which so I so I think to not invalidate that idea, like, yeah, actually, I think it's true. I think there we do live to a certain extent in a prison planet. Now, take a wider view of that. Okay, well, the prison planet concept is just to give your audience an ideas,
Thank
is
you.
that our souls are born here and we're sort of trapped. The souls can't leave the planet. Some people say the moon, hey, there's some kind of giant energy device on the moon that's sort of keeping some kind of electromagnetic field here. So humans uh, born here can't. The idea is that our souls are trapped here, and then we're in this constant reincarnation cycle that we can never get off the planet. Some people say, when you see the light, don't go into the light, go the other direction. And there's all these like narratives around that. I like to say, okay, well, that's a narrative, and I take all narratives in this way. Well, let's decode it. Let's figure out the highest possible perspective without invalidating that as a reality. But let's go further with it. So let's say our souls originated in another part of the galaxy, the Arcturians, the Pleiadians, or whatever, and we saw this prison planet as a so-called prison planet of heavy density that needs uplifting. Well, we still, our souls, uh, this, this is what I believe, our souls chose to incarnate on this planet to help elevate and raise the consciousness of the planet so we can liberate the planet from being this prison planet because of the heavy density that revolves around this planet. We are, higher beings and higher consciousnesses. When I say higher, I mean like higher vibratory beings on planets of peace and without war and without the heavy density energies that exist on this planet, chose to come here and to uplift the planet, to liberate it, to free it from these things. So, as uh, one of these souls that chose to come here,
Yeah.
I chose to liberate the planet so it will no longer be a so-called prison planet. And therefore, we are in the process of this liberation, so to
Yeah.
say, to raise the consciousness of the planet. So we're not going to be trapped in this spiral of prison-like incarnations. And an example. I'm just using that as an example. I don't
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
believe in that per se, but I feel I'm just giving people the ability to choose your own timeline and not to be limited. If someone tells you this story or that story or whatever, you can always create a new story that sort of circumvents or doesn't invalidate the story, but still creates a positive direction for you to go. Because if you just subscribe to that storyline of, oh, we're in a prison planet, my soul just incarnates here, well, you might as well put a gun to your head. Why are you even living life right now? What's your motivation for doing anything if you're just going to subscribe to such a doom and gloom scenario?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
and then reincarnate back in the prison.
Yeah, just reincarnated from prison. Okay, yeah, I guess I'm just gonna live miserably through because there's nowhere to go. I'm just living out life as a slave, you know. And and not to invalidate the, those different belief systems. And there's a lot of religions out there that are very much into the victimhood and into, we're born into sin and all this stuff. Um, which again, not to invalidate that, but I say, be creative and find a alternative storyline that choose your own adventure that gets you out of that prison, gets you out of that deep, um, depressing enslavement. It's all just story.
Liberation, yeah.
Liberation. Liberate yourself by writing a new story.
Yeah.
And so that's why I tend to gravitate towards the storylines that are being delivered through the people I interview through the channeling work, is because that is the message. The message is, you guys are creating your own drama and your own, limitations. Uh, you can uncreate them
Yeah.
by focusing on positive storylines or different outcomes. And sometimes it can be magical miracles that happen overnight, but it takes some work. Our beliefs, our humanity's beliefs, especially in the negative side of things, of humans being, we've been sort of force fed these ideas of the old concept of Darwinism of survival of the fittest and other types of limited belief systems that have been instilled to us through religion and these types of
Yeah.
things that uh, that it's going to take time to sort of unblock a lot of those limitations. So it may not happen overnight, but we can, as we find the cracks in the story, the current story that's been shoveled or fed to us, as we
Yeah.
find those cracks and we can figure out how we can retell the story in a new, more positive light, let's do it. Let's find every opportunity where we can. And again, not invalidate any stories, because by invalidating, what you do then is you're sort of telling someone else that what they believe in is not good enough. And it's almost the
Yeah.
same as telling them they're in a prison planet, or like force feeding them that idea. You don't want to invalidate someone's belief system, because that doesn't give them a way out. That's the difference between empathy and sympathy. When
Mm.
you sympathize with someone, you're going to their level and you're not showing them, you're just simply like, yeah, oh, poor you, poor me, we're all poor, we're all victims. Empathy is understanding where they're at in their journey and showing them through your own journey that there's an alternative.
Yeah. So it's
So,
more
yeah,
empowering.
more empowering. Yeah. So I think it's, for me, just finding those empowering storylines that help people get out of their limitations and
So, yeah, we were just talking about choosing your a more empowering path and or, having empathy for people wherever they are in their journey as well, and helping give them space really to allow that to evolve.
exactly. That's the part of my journey is I've learned you can't tell anybody anything. You can show them, but you can't tell them.
Yeah, it's true. It's well, it's funny. My kids think I'm, very interesting and strange, which is fine. But they were watching, Indiana Jones movie, one of the more recent ones, and, my son
Sorry,
Will
I don't know if that's coming through. Okay, back in. Hopefully, I won't have any more
it
interruptions.
it's all good. Are you familiar with Suzanne Giesemann at all?
Suzanne
Giesemann?
Kiesman. I don't think so. No.
She's a medium, but one of her guides that she channels is, says all is in perfect order always. And just got like,
Yes.
remember, like, no matter what happens, it's okay. Like,
Yes.
so anyway, so I have two young kids, Will and Taylor, and they were watching an Indiana Jones movie, and they have their opinions about me and my interests. talking about empathy that they have for me and I have for them, and, the movie involved crystal skulls,
Oh,
and at the
yeah.
very end of the movie, my son goes, "Dad, like, you would love this," and, like, all of a sudden, these crystal skulls sort of animate, and they're like alien skulls, and this alien spaceship takes off and everything like that. So, I bring that up, A, because, they were interested in that, but I know that you are I don't know if you're making a movie of it or what, but you're doing some research and some interesting things with crystal skulls, correct?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
So, that project has kinda fallen to the wayside for the
Mhm.
moment,
Okay.
but yeah, I was, very involved. I was following, the skull keeper Bill Holman around with the Mitchell Hedges skull
Okay.
and, working on a project, and, yeah, unfortunately, it took some twists and turns, and it was an amazing adventure and journey, but, I kinda left that one. We had to let that one go.
Okay. Well
Yeah.
well, anyway, it's a super interesting topic, and I know that that has come up in a number of channelings and,
Yeah.
about some of the information that they contain and that will, I suppose, come out at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that for me in my journey, there definitely is I saw a lot of people having interactions with the skull that was just unexplainable. You know, they talk about the mysteries of our planet. That was definitely interesting to watch how people would get downloads and interact with the consciousness,
Mhm.
and there was information being exchanged on a telepathic or energetic level. No doubt, you know, the hundreds of people that I saw interact with the skulls, and how they would react to it. It was fascinating.
Where are they considered from? Their origin? Is it
Well, there's different theories and ideas. I think different tribes have different there's different skulls for the different groups. Now there's the legend of the 13 skulls, right? Which has sort of been a big part of the metaphysical spiritual world. And even Bashar talks about a council of 13 at during the times of Atlantis. And then there's this idea of the 13 grandmothers that were imbued with a skull, or they took a skull, and each skull was imbued with different information regarding different cultures and histories, um, and sort of humanity's true history. And then that at the right time, the legend goes that at the right time, these skulls would then surface, and humanity would access the information as sort of like a time capsule type
I had
concept.
I had heard that. I didn't realize that the skulls were involved in that. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also I've heard of discs, that there's these, different crystal discs, similar to the skull phenomenon where, these crystal disc-shaped objects also have information. Um, the Palladies have talked about that. So it's again, these are different storylines, different people bringing them through in different ways, and there's
Mhm.
a lot of overlap. And there's a lot of, this person says this and that person says that, and it doesn't quite match. So I tend to look for the places where they match as opposed to looking for where they don't match.
Yeah.
And going with that, it's more exciting, and again, it keeps the door open for more to come. And it's fun. It's like, yeah, it's like an Indiana Jones movie, no doubt.
Very well, man. Well, listen, Chris Bledsoe, I wanted to ask you this. Um,
Yeah.
he recently well, the last time we talked, there was he had not aired on the Sean Ryan show,
Right, right.
and then it was
Haven't
like the
caught that one yet, but
okay. Oh, well, then I don't really
how is it?
don't wanna spoil for you then.
No, no, go ahead. I'll listen. I'll eventually listen to it.
Well,
What are the
he
bullet
made a
points?
prediction.
Mhm.
He
Okay, I think I
said
caught the prediction with the East, is it Easter? What day was it? It's,
it was like Easter, like March 2026,
2026, yeah, the
with
Sphinx and the alignment, right?
the alignment with the Star of Regulus, and he
Yeah.
talked about, Robert Edward Grant and this type of thing.
Mhm.
What, What is your best guess? What do you think we're gonna see?
I think it'll turn out to be a nothing burger, in the sense that I think we've had so many astrological alignments over just the past few years, of different energies coming into the planet, and though the energies have been intense, it's again the way they come through is the ETs in my interviews. We talk about uh, one of the universal laws is free will,
Mm,
and we have these beings take that quite seriously. They honor free will, and they do everything in their power to sort of have make those subtle influences on humanity to steer humanity to drive the evolution in a positive light. And there's negative forces doing their what maybe not so subtle ways to push humanity in a negative light. But
yeah,
um, overall, I think there's a lot of positive energies flooding the planet right now, and uh most people are oblivious to it. It's not on the nightly news. Oh, we're now currently getting positive frequencies from the Octurian star system that are helping the evolution of the planet. That's not really being
yeah,
advertised on nightly TV. So I think I'm sure, as there has been alignments in portals and different positive energies flowing through the planet on a regular basis. I'm sure this one is probably a big one, and I'm sure energies are going to pour through. But as far as that manifesting into a physical outcome of something that the whole world can go, aha, here we go. I'm gonna probably say that's not gonna happen. I'm gonna say
mm,
probably energetically, those sensitive to the energy could probably feel it and feel a pouring in of positive energy that again goes through the different energy grids of the system and then helps raise the evolution of the planet. But um, these and I'm sure Chris is tied into that energy quite strongly. So he's feeling
yeah,
that and getting the direct messages on that and giving people a heads up, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think having expectations of, a giant, light coming out and awakening the world to a new reality. And all of a sudden we're all going to have this, new perspective on things and the world's going to be liberated. I think we're going through that as a process right now. I don't think that's going to be like a one event kind of thing.
yeah,
Um
yeah. It'll
and
be interesting to see how things play out for sure.
yeah, and it has been playing out. And I think what happens is just just to give, my 2 cents, what happens is we're so focused on this event or this date or that we miss. It's happening right now, guys. Just turn on social media, look at all the massive changes that are happening on the globe right now in a positive sense. Of course, a lot of people are screaming, it's the end of the world and all this stuff. It is. It's the end of the old world. We're moving into a new
Yeah,
world very rapidly. Disclosure is happening. Big shifts are happening on a global stage where the old paradigm is collapsing and new paradigms are getting put into place that are decentralized, Bitcoin adoption of a Bitcoin reserve. When a lot of people, there's a lot of doom and gloom to that scenario, but there's a lot of positiveness too when you
yeah,
look at it at a compared to what we've been dealing with, right, with Federal Reserve and non-transparent way monetary systems and central banks and central bank digital currencies and all these types of things. There's a lot of positivity happening right now that I think we're just so focused on this event, this date, or this thing, and then it's going to be okay, and then it's going to be okay. So just yes, this is part of the process. Yes to it all. Yes to Chris Bledsoe and to 2026. I absolutely don't doubt that that day is going to be very significant and that there's going to be some awesome stuff happening. But it's not the by focusing too hard on that date or this thing, we're kind of missing all the amazing
Yeah.
lovely things going on right now.
It's, I think you put out on Twitter the other day, it was like a graphic of, like, the present moment
Mhm.
and just how it fluctuates and, between the past and the present. But you're right, I mean, the mindfulness of the moment, all these things happening now, and you could lose track of it if you're looking too far ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great. I love, predictions. I love having goals and moving and looking at these things and understanding. But I think big picture is yes and it's always a yes and. So yes, that's that and we're right now is really a time of great shifts and amazing positive things happening on the planet that if we're too focused on the other stuff, then we miss the beauty that's happening right now.
Yeah, excellent. Ruben, what would you like people to sort of take away from kinda your work and what you got going on now?
Well, takeaway, I think, I think just again, we're in this time of disclosures. And for a lot of people right now, it can be quite overwhelming because if it hasn't been, if you've just sort of been living your day-to-day life and not paying attention to all of these conspiracies, right? That have been UFOs, JFK assassinations, 9/11, government corruption.
Yeah,
Uh, if you've been in it for a while, it's like, oh yeah, it's whatever, it's par for the course. But if you're sort of new to it, believe the crumbling of belief systems, and that's what the UFO thread. That's why I've been pushing that narrative for so long and saying, hey guys, follow this breadcrumb because it I think it's the master thread to them all, where you realize that the world that we live in is been sort of designed and constructed for us to be limited in our perspectives and outlooks and understandings. So that's all kind of coming apart right now, which for many people is quite scary because it's moving out of the comfort zone. There's a comfort to limitation.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and as that crumbles, a lot of people are losing their minds. My advice would be just to get out of your mind and get into the heart and continue to feel into what really matters, which is family, community, um, your are you okay as a person? Uh, Most likely, yes. Most people through these big shifts, some people are, like the disasters, the California fires in North Carolina, and these things. People are losing their physical well-being in their homes, and yes, that's for sure. That's not easy. I couldn't even imagine what some
yeah,
people are dealing with. But generally, on a global level, I think a lot of the drama that we're seeing is people getting upset and triggered and not because of anything that's physically happening to them in their community, but more of just what's being projected through the news and through their crumbling of certain belief systems.
yeah,
Um, so just to go back into the heart and to realize that that whole world is an illusion anyways, the interwebs. It's like, can you touch it? Can you taste it? Can you feel it?
yeah,
It's just images on a screen, words, images, narratives, storylines. So let all that kind of fall to the wayside. Go into what really matters, which is, you yourself, your day-to-day activities and how you navigate as a human on this planet, and allow this all to play out, because there's a greater plan that Mother Gaia, all the different ETs, all the different angels and other entities around us have had for this planet for a long time, for the planet's evolution. And yes, is it Armageddon? Yes, it's the destruction of the old paradigms, and we're moving into a new. So just allow
yeah.
it to play out. be gentle to yourself, be gentle to your loved ones, um, and and have a little more allowance and acceptance, and don't get so hung up on the little details. Let the bigger picture play out.
It's, yeah, there's a lot you just unpacked a lot. There's a lot of good stuff in that, but just our getting into the heart, the interconnectedness, our common humanity, caring for one another, supporting and encouraging and being
Yeah,
kind to one another,
yeah, yeah,
building each
yeah.
other up.
The COVID years was, I think, a big challenge for a lot of people because, so much fear was projected through the interwebs and things that people bought into those narratives and lost their connections, and that was a very unfortunate. So just to remind people that now that we're through that, it's some people still may not be on board with this, but there is plenty of evidence to show that the whole thing was a giant psyop and was a created event to create separation on the planet. And we sort of needed to go through that to help people, I think, discern um, for themselves what is, to disconnect from these narratives, to disconnect from the media, disconnect from government officials telling you to do this and that. And that was its purpose overall on a grander scale. But that's not reality. It's not really what's going on.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? When you talk about mindfulness, awareness, it doesn't care. It doesn't matter what I believe or not, right? Like your awareness, once you start seeing through things or seeing things for what they really are,
Yeah.
like you said, it's hard to go back. You can't really.
Yeah. Yeah. There's and the the big thing that we have to look forward to is we're moving into a new era, a new planet, a new way of doing things, new energies coming into this planet, which is very exciting. Uh,
Yeah.
Not many people can believe that right now with all the challenges that are happening. But what has always happened through history is when we meet these challenges, we always come out on the other side stronger and better, and with greater insights. So I would say instead of fearing and running, meet these challenges, embrace a new belief system, be open to something new or different that perhaps your neighbor or friend or family member is telling or sharing. Um, doesn't mean you have to buy into it all at once, but just be open to listening to what it is, and pick, like Bruce Lee says, take what's useful, disregard what's useless, for you, and then ultimately make whatever it is your own. So these are uh, uh, these are the times to be doing that.
So after all of this, we end with hope and optimism.
Absolutely. It's otherwise you might again you might as well put a gun to your head and say, okay, why am I wasting energy and time here?
Well, it's one of those things, it's like, okay, you see, like with COVID or this fear and all this other stuff, it's like, oh man, when's this going to end or will it ever end? And it's like, wait a minute, we're going to get through this. It's going to happen. And
Totally.
now we're there, we're in it. Things are unfolding now. So it is an exciting time. There is hope,
Super.
there is optimism. So yeah, and you are holding true to your mission. You're educating a ton of people at your website, with your community, your work, your podcast, your TV show. You're doing a really awesome job, man. I really appreciate what you do, and you've been very helpful to me in my life. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm excited that everybody's excited about the same kind of stuff I'm excited about. That's
Well, that's true, man. I'm like, it's funny when you learn about some of this stuff. It's like, all right, now I want to talk to somebody about it, and who do I have to talk
exactly,
to?
exactly, exactly.
That's funny. Well, listen, man, I thank you so much. I appreciate it. And well, I'll put links to your website and your community and your TV show because I do want people to check it out and learn some things and, you know, some of the awesome work that you're doing.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we have a great community over at interviewwithed.com.org, and I've slowed down a little bit. I was going strong with it up for the past 3 years, but now we've got an amazing archive of interviews and other information on there, and still doing stuff more on a monthly basis than a weekly basis. But yeah, it's posting stuff on there.
Yeah, it's really great, man. I've been, enjoying catching up on there's all these other, there's a lot more than just channeling. There's a lot of really practical advice on all kinds of stuff, that is worth people's time to go check out. So
Yes,
absolutely.
yes. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, gardening, from gardening to I don't know what else do we do in there. We have
You
all
had
kinds
a
of
whole
stuff. Making
video on
coffee.
making I watched a video on make cosmic coffee.
Cosmic coffee, exactly. Yes.
Well, go I mean, that was really interesting to me too, this going back to the water, right? Like blessing the
Mhm.
water, Mori is it Morimoto? Is that
Dr. Emoto. Yep.
Dr. Emoto?
Mhm.
Just and that, whole thing is super fascinating. We didn't even talk about that, but that's, very there's so many things about the earth and water and the elements and everything else that's, really helpful and grounding
And that's
and
what's exciting about the
oh, go ahead.
future here is really those aspects of nature and water, and understanding the structured water and its importance is going to it is already opening the door to a whole slew of new technologies that I believe we're going to really help humanity get through this sort of heavier time of poisons and chemicals and different things. That when we realize the power of structured water and the power of frequency and vibration, we really can clean up this planet quite rapidly when we
Yeah.
put our focus and intention to it.
It's one of the another aspect of things that are gonna be exciting to see unfold for sure.
Absolutely, it's happening. I'll do
Excellent.
my best to keep reporting on it.
Hey, man. Well, hopefully we talk again. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in today and being with us. May you find joy, flow, and adventure on your journey. And if you got something from it, please like, share, and subscribe and or comment. It means a lot. Thank you.